The job of the artist is to be interesting. That's your job. Be interesting. If you can't be interesting, don't be an artist.
You're listening to Creatives Prevail, unraveling the stories of creative professionals.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creatives Prevail. I am your host, Mike Zimmerlich, and my next guest is music executive and founder of the Black Box music agency, Livia Tortella. In this interview, we discuss her decades-long career working at labels such as Polygram, Island Def Jam, Atlantic, and leading to become the co-president of Warner Music. We also discuss why she became an entrepreneur after years of being in the corporate world, thus creating Black Box, as well as where the music industry is at today, including marketing as well as artist development. Let's get into it. Hey, Livia, how are you?
Awesome, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking. It's interesting because I'm based in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's been super cloudy like the last couple of days, which is so unusual for here. And I like to talk about the weather because it's such a common ground for everybody. But how's it by you right now?
It's now the sun has come out, but it's been raining for 4 days straight. So for LA,
Wow.
that's a big deal.
So it is your fault because we're getting all that rain that came through Los Angeles. It comes over to Phoenix, so it's your fault that we're
It's
getting
your
all that
turn.
rain. Yes, my turn. Exactly. I find it really fascinating. And of course, you're being based in LA. I love the fact that your background essentially was I saw notice a couple of interests of yours. When you were in college, you got a degree in communications, but then also on the side were working for the college, for the college radio station as the program director. But then you're also were producing and directing films too. So did you always have that combination of passion between film and music?
Yeah, I mean, I always loved music. Really addicted to it, actually. But I thought I was going to be a filmmaker at that point in my life. So in college, I learned everything about visual dynamics, and music was just something I did out of love and passion. And I loved writing as well. So writing about music was my thing. And there was a point where I loved getting a communication degree because it gave me a lot of touch points to a lot of different media, which came in really handy in my career later. But there was a point where I was just done with school. I said, I need to get out. I need a job. And they had a post for Polygram Records to write bios. And I said, I could do this. You know what I mean? And I applied. And the funny thing is, luck is really important. I was a very lucky person. But I was also had this part-time job at this Italian delicatessen, just slicing cold cuts. And this woman would come with the best t-shirts. Like she'd have Tears for Fears t-shirts, Big Country, all my favorite bands. And I said, well, how are you getting these t-shirts? And she goes, well, I work at Polygram. And I'm like going, wow. And then she ended up interviewing me for the job. So it was this crazy coincidence that
Wow.
when I was waiting in the lobby, she came down the stairs and she goes, I know you. And I go, I know you. It was the weirdest thing. But it did give me this kind of entryway in a world that, kids today, you hear so much about the business. It's so transparent, right? There's people with blogs and everyone's telling you about royalties and about streaming and but back in those days it was still behind a curtain. So the fact that I was finding out what a record label was, you know what I mean? Things like that was pretty exciting time.
Was there something back then that you assumed is how it worked and it ended up didn't working that way, or vice versa, that you didn't realize that's what actually happened behind the scenes?
I had no idea that they had all these teams that had such direct engagement with the artists. Like the whole marketing department, there was press, there was video creation, A&R making records. I had no idea that there were people that engaged. I kind of had a view of it being more like distribution. Do you know what I mean? Like somehow we would make or print the records, but I didn't feel that there was a marketing team. So it made a lot of sense that I was really attracted to that area the minute I saw it in action. Yeah.
Was that where your passion for marketing truly came in, or was it even when you were getting your degree in college that you realized, okay, I want to be on the marketing arm? Because you mentioned that you thought you were going to be a filmmaker, but was marketing in that equation, or was that later on when you started working for Polygram?
Later, when I saw it in action, I felt like, wow, this is a really neat kind of combination of everything I know. Like, you know what I mean? Oh, we're making videos. Well, I know how to make videos. Oh, we make records. Yeah, done sound. So I understand that part. We're doing publicity. I get that. Like, you know what I mean? It was kind of, you were like in the epicenter of all of this media. And I learned to sort of master it all. And I don't know, I can't really describe sort of the shift from wanting to be an artist to wanting to be behind the scenes, but I do know that when I had my short film, I had a short film that got in the Montreal Film Festival. I'm originally from Montreal, and that's where I studied. And it's a pretty renowned international festival. So I was in the
Mm-hmm.
short film student segment. And I remember being terrified during the screening, and I just at that time just didn't think I could handle being an artist. Like having kind of like all I saw were all the mistakes I made in the video, or like, and everybody was watching it and like, what would the reaction be? And I think I learned then and there how hard it is to be an artist. And it kind of stuck in my brain like throughout my career.
I really appreciate that you mentioned that because it is very, very challenging. I've always been the behind the scenes person. In fact, it took a lot just to do this podcast, in fact.
Yeah.
And I try to remind myself every single day on how difficult it is to be a creative person, because
Yeah.
it is, because of, like, as you mentioned, the fear of the rejection or the fear of the scrutiny. And because it's essentially an extension of yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's interesting that you mentioned earlier on, you realized how difficult it was, and you were reminded of that throughout your entire career. And I think that's important, especially when you are representing artists and understanding how difficult that role is.
Absolutely. It's kind of like I didn't expect it, you know. It was always I was always shy by nature. And when I was thrown into it, oh, like I love the art form. So I'm thinking, okay, I could do it. And then all of a sudden you're confronted by that. And I've seen it in every single step of like it's the artist, it's them against the world. It's their message. It's like no one understands that pressure. It is unbelievably scary. And I feel kind of like it's helped me, you know, connect with them a little bit and really lean into what they have to say. And I think also because it's so hard, you know, you want to make sure that there's something in that. There's something almost like a destiny in that. You know what I mean? Like you have to overcome so much in order to just share something with the world, that it must be for a reason. Do you know what I mean? It must be connected
Mhm.
with a larger experience. So I do put that there. Yeah, I do put artists in that on that level.
I would as well.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, about connectivity, is I want to talk about the importance of networking and
Yeah.
building relationships, because I noticed that your career progressed quite, I mean, we'll talk about where you ultimately went to,
Mhm.
but I did want to talk more about that aspect of things, because you worked in Polygram for a number of years, and then you moved on to Island Def Jam.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more, because I want to talk about moving on to different companies, why you decide to make those different types of changes in your career path. Did it, how did it help you and so forth? And essentially how that came about, because I know so many of us will feel stuck where we hit a plateau and we can't progress further than we want to go.
Such an interesting question because the way it happened for me was very much like I found a job that fascinated me. Like I was just rewriting bios, but I was in my chair holding a black and white of Peter Murphy from Bauhaus, like a black and white picture. And I thought I had the coolest job in the world because I had to get 50 copies of that made. So to me, it was like everything was amazing. Everything was, I can't believe I'm doing it. I can't believe I'm touching it. Right. Um, and I dedicated a lot of time to it because it was just not, it didn't feel like work. And I think like, if you kind of lock into something that doesn't feel like work and you're putting all these hours in it, I think you get a lot of like people are noticing, okay, this girl, she's a hustler, and you know what I mean. So I had a lot of people notice the amount of work. So I think like work ethic was really, really important, played a really big role in all of it. And I also got a chance to kind of see, uh, I mean, the time I started was in 1989. So if you look at how the music business changed, like we were still like making vinyl, even though it was slowly not becoming the dominant format because CDs were starting to really take hold. So everyone was replacing their libraries. But like in that moment, it became kind of, if you took a step back, you realize there was a lot of like piracy happening at the time. And it was actually the beginning of a very big shift, a downward shift in music, right? But at the time, we didn't see it because there was all these formats going on. So I got to see that, and I also got a lot of these opportunities because there were, Universal had bought Polygram, right? So because Universal bought Polygram, I got to move to Toronto. I was all of a sudden like exposed to the A&M catalog and the Island Records catalog. All of this played a part that when the boss I was working for at Polygram in Canada got a job in New York, he offered me the job in New York, and I became quickly a favorite with all the managers because I had an experience with all of these artists in Canada. So when there was that big Universal Polygram merger and everyone lost their jobs, I was the one person the managers recognized. So
Hmm.
that allowed me to have like, oh, okay, we know this girl. That's how bad that merger was. So when people tells me, okay, what are your special skills? I used to say as a joke, mergers and acquisitions, because I saw I saw the most horrible acquisition happen at that time where everyone lost their jobs. And it of course impacted Sony and BMG and all of the ones that were to come. But it was that kind of a lot of change in the music industry that ended up at that point meaning a lot of opportunity for me, without really planning it. So it wasn't a calculated move, Mike, like, oh my God, I'm going to be the president of a label one day. It wasn't that at all. It was kind of like I really enjoyed my work and followed, the opportunities that it gave me. I was just lucky enough to just kind of be in the middle of a lot of that. So how the shift happened to New York is I got really close to Julie Greenwald and Leor Cohen at the time. So even John Reed, who brought me to New York, ended up moving to the UK. And I believe to run Live Nation. I'm not quite sure, but he had a lot of different companies, and I owe a lot to John Reed because he provided that opportunity to go to New York, which I never forgot. And I got to meet Julie and Leor, and again, just by keeping my head down, they just kind of realized, okay, there's something going on here. She's like crazy hard worker. People like her. I had this also thing where if somebody would call them, I'd call them right back. How could I help you? It was this kind of very immediate thing that I like to do that to me made sense versus waiting to get back to people. And you know what I mean? I just loved connecting with people. I think that kind of served me well too. And it's an interesting kind of habit when, because I'm also shy, right? So it was just like I kind of counteracted everything with being speedy. If I get an email from a manager, I would respond. If they call me, I go, yeah, how can I help? Like this kind of I don't know if I overcompensated, but I felt like between the passion and overcompensating for my shyness, I think that ended up working in my favor. If that makes any sense whatsoever.
Do you feel it does? Because
Yeah.
I see the same thing in me. I'm naturally an introvert and the same way where
Yeah.
I will respond to people right away. So I'm curious. Do you find yourself as a natural caretaker?
Yes. Yes. I want to take care of my family, everybody in the room. I guess that is my kind of connection with artists, is that because I understand like what they're going through, and I really am interested in their story, which is a big part of what I ended up doing at Black Box. I just ended up being just a better marketer because I understood what they were trying to say. I tried to represent what they were trying to say. It wasn't about external, forces or radio or these things. It was really always about them and trying to make them successful. So I think the caretaking part does play a role in that.
So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here because you gone through a number, like I said, a number of acquisitions as your skill set, if you will, because you moved on to Atlantic. So you want to touch base on that real fast, and then we'll talk about then continuing on from there.
Absolutely. So I got close at Island Dev Jam with Julie Greenwald. She was the head of marketing at the time. And we got real close. We like to tell the story. She was 7 months pregnant at the time, and we were always working really late at the office, and we just got close. I was always worried that, oh my god, what if she goes into labor? What do I do? Um, and I think it's that shared work ethic, that let us connect. And I think when she became general manager, and then she was offered the co-presidency, I believe, at Atlantic. I think that was her title, and she asked me to come over and be the head of marketing. So that's how I made the move from a system that I was there from the very beginning. Because even though Polygram changed hands with Universal, it was like I was at Universal for, I'd say, 13 years, if you
Wow.
count. Yeah. So I moved from there to Atlantic into the Warner system for the first time. And with Julie and Leor, and as they ascended, opportunities were there for me. So it was as a result of a very long relationship and her really understanding how I worked and us working really well together. So I think to answer your question about, was it a move? I don't know. I think though I found leadership that I resonated with, and I stuck with it, versus trying to figure out some kind of career plan, or I've been at this company 2 years, it's too long. I think that that's almost a bit of a fallacy, right? Like, in terms of looking at your career as that versus looking at it as like, am I learning? Am I connecting? Am I doing some good? Like, are, is the job fulfilling those kind of goals? And that's how I looked at my career.
That's I really appreciate you mentioning that because I feel that also helps set your expectations.
Yeah.
Because I know so many they feel, including myself, that we get sometimes frustrated because we have this fixation of getting to a certain point in our careers at a certain period of time, but we only have so much control over that. There's actually very little control, in fact, in
Yep.
many aspects of those things. So I'm glad that you mentioned that you essentially were just ready for those opportunities, right? So what
Yes.
is was it opportunities is what luck plus preparation. So right, so I feels very strongly in that too, is making sure that you are ready for those opportunities when they come along the way, when you get the luck that comes along with it. But yeah, I think it's important that you realize that you never know where things are going to lead to you, but that's why it's important to do the work ethic like you mentioned, as well as the fact of keeping those relationships alive, which is also a skill set in itself to do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Um, but I think too, there's a thing to add, which is kind of working almost like living in the present, with the job, and not kind of thinking about what is the next move or who's that next person I need to connect with. Cause I've never thought of those things. If I'm being really honest, and it's funny that without having a plan, I ended up becoming president of record label, and I always kind of look at that as a very kind of, there are people that literally want to be a president of the record label and they want to work towards that, and that wasn't something that that's not how I did it. It was very much like, am I learning? Am I having an impact? Am I happy? Is there kind of like momentum, like with like titles and salaries, or am I being taken care of? Like that kind of stuff. And if those things were checked, I pretty much stayed put, and a lot of the opportunities kind of revealed themselves to me. So I had a very different path.
I definitely want to talk about that, of course, more because
Yeah.
for context, this is becoming essentially a president, co-president of Warner, right?
Yeah,
Is because I
co-president.
noticed co-president of Warner. So I mean, that's even from being head of marketing to now being president of one of the largest record labels in the world. I mean, that's still quite a bit of a leap. So,
Yeah.
of course, being president is important, but can you talk more about how that came about?
I have vampires to thank for that. So in 2008, and also Kid Rock, But in 2008 at Atlantic, I was like the general manager of the label at the time. And I only hung on to a couple of projects and I oversaw the marketing department. And one of them was Kid Rock, and he brought through his album. And I got very close to him. And again, like he was one of those artists that was impacted by, he had a lot of relationships predating, me arriving. So I ended up sort of, and I always was a fan. So I ended up kind of getting in his world, and he had a great, success, a global success with Rock and Roll Jesus, which was a 5 million, unit seller. You know what I mean? So that was also very important. And also, I helped sign the Twilight soundtracks, and that's just my love of reading, my love of goth, my love of vampires. I just and also my relationship with Alex Bitsavis, who we had a record deal with, and she brought this property into the door, and I'm like, we got to do it, we got to do it. And I remember at that time, everyone was like, wow, this deal is really aggressive. Are you sure? Are you sure? And I've never been more sure of anything in my life that this was going to be gigantic. And that was a great experience. So there was, in that year or two, we made a lot of money for the company over these two projects. And I think that kind of like, and then Lior gave me the opportunity, you know what I mean, to move on to, so great art, at the end of the day, and being able to take advantage of these projects and really deliver them is always the sign of opportunity. So to me, it always boils down to the work,
I
always.
I really appreciate the fact that it's essentially came full circle, where you were originally thinking you were going to become a filmmaker, and in turn, developing a soundtrack is essentially what got you to be co-president of Warner.
Yeah.
So I always love that fact that it really came all around for you. And you worked on so many amazing soundtracks. I saw on your list Transformers 3.
Yeah.
There was a whole bunch of them that were on there that I thought were really fascinating. So
Yeah.
did you always have a fascination for soundtracks?
Oh yeah, I love it. I think it's all story. It all goes under the umbrella of storytelling, which is something that when I realized the connections throughout my life, that was the essential connection. I love film and music together. It's amazing how it tells a compelling story. Like lately, I'm finally am seeing The Bear. I don't know if you saw The Bear yet.
No, I have not.
But the use of music in that series is insane. Like just the moments in there, and like, oh my, it's like I would say, oh my god, he used Refused. I haven't heard that song in forever. And like, music has a personality. It's a character, right? In all of these
Mm-hmm.
properties. So that connection makes so much sense, and I threw myself in it. And like when you look back, it's like it is storytelling, that connects all of it.
It truly is. In fact, last night I've watched it a number of times, but the film Baby Driver, which
Mm.
they do a fantastic job incorporating the soundtrack into, and making, as you mentioned, the soundtrack is essentially its own character within the film. And so
Yeah.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah. And Alex Pitsavis, and just another shout out to her. I mean, she is, having done like Gossip Girl to the OC to like, to Twilight, is just like she really knows how to capture, you know what I mean? That
Hmm.
character. And like, and I'll never forget when she said to me, it's like, for me, it's the scene that's the boss. It's not necessarily the music. Yeah, I've got a repertoire of music and I incorporate it, but it's really about the story that's being told, not the relationship. That it's not about the favor. It's not about anything. It's about matching the right moment together. So she's the best at it, and an inspiration.
So you were working at Warner for many years.
Mhm.
One of the things I do want to ask you, because you've also been the head of departments in general for many years up until this point as well.
Mhm.
What do you feel is often the most misunderstood about those roles? Because I can only imagine the amount of decision making and pressure that you're on when you have that much responsibility. So, can you talk a little bit more about that, about what you
Yeah.
find is often misunderstood about having that type of a position?
Well, I think oftentimes when people get that role, get that opportunity, they're not, often prepared for what it's truly about. So I went from being a project centric person and really all about, breaking artists or about like achieving my goals within the project to trying to motivate a staff, and it's all about leadership, right? It's all about your style getting the performance that you want from them. It's not about the work itself. And I think that that transition, you need to be prepared for that, and I wasn't necessarily prepared to let go of the high that I had in the projects and doing the work, right? Because being the president of a record label is about really leading and motivating, and you know what I mean? And sometimes having to deal with politics, and dynamics. And I realized really quickly in terms of large structures that I wasn't that interested in managing the dynamics of that type of organization, but love the work. You know what I mean? So I think that that's what Black Box does for me, is allows me to do the work. You know what I mean? And still like incorporate leadership in a way that makes sense for me. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's a great question because it's a seismic shift.
I did want to talk about that because we'll, of course, now talk about
Mm,
your current endeavor, which is
yeah.
Black Box. And I did find it very interesting that you were in the I mean, from the very beginning, you were part of the corporate world in music. And then almost over 20 years later, you decided to venture off on your own. So was it because essentially, as you mentioned, you realized that you really want to still be involved in the projects rather than specifically, I mean, there's leadership too, right? Of course, when you're running your own agency. But did you find that you were just too involved in the politics than being actually involved in the work itself?
Yeah, I mean, I could really speak specifically for my own experience. I thought it was definitely a lot more politics than a lot more upward management, sideward management, and management of people. And I probably didn't love the balance of that versus working. And I wasn't prepared for the kind of skills that you really needed to manage something like that. Again, prepare for the work, knew how to break an act, knew how to do, all of the things, make money for the artists, pick the right team members, like things like that, that I felt, really natural at. But the larger part of it, I think, was kind of a challenge. But I'm trying to sort of make my way back to the original question. Damn, I lost that my train of thought.
That's okay. I did want to ask you though specifically about going to Block Box though. So
Yeah.
did you find that there was, I guess the best word I can explain it is a culture shock for yourself because of the fact that it was so fundamentally different?
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Now I remember the whole corporate life.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
so I felt the transition was surprisingly easy. There were things about being an entrepreneur that were new, like everything being on you, for example, the decisions you're making, like it's your dollars, you know what I mean, in terms of investing in infrastructure, all of those things. Like there's nobody to kind of say it's all on you, right? It's like there's nobody to blame.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're in complete control of all of it. So obviously that has a different kind of pressure. But for me, it was also very pleasing because everything was on me. I could trust, right, that I'm going to put in the necessary hours and that something will happen, right? I could trust that process. So it ended up being surprisingly easy in some respects versus what happens in corporate situations where you don't always have control over the signing aspect, for example, as co-president, like what gets signed, what doesn't get signed, what gets dropped, you know what I mean? How the day-to-day sort of management of things happen. But I think in general, the corporate life did prepare me for being an entrepreneur because I was lucky enough to have really entrepreneurial like presidents that I worked for in the past, right? Like Leor Cohen is not a corporate figure. You know what I mean? He's definitely instinctual leader, and like now he's like running YouTube, but like he has like there's something about that leadership style. Same with Julie Greenwald, that, and also for my first boss in Canada, Bob Ansell, they were all maverick in their own way, right? So I don't think corporations are bad because they're corporate. I do think leadership matters, right? And I think I was always lucky that I was able to learn by these incredible leaders. So in a way, it did prepare me for entrepreneurial life, which is a surprise for me. Yeah, yeah.
So I'd love to know more about Black Box. So essentially, from what I understand, essentially it's a accumulation of all the resources and skills that you've developed over the years. And yeah, so can you talk a little bit more about this agency and specifically why you decided to create this in particular?
So what was happening at the time when I was co-president at Warner, and it was starting to happen beforehand, but when we started to get into digital and streaming, what ended up increasingly happening was that the record labels were signing more and more and more, uh, because not one artist was getting it done. Like, it used to be that 1 out of 10 artists, would
Mm-hmm.
there was a ratio, you know what I mean, in terms of artists breaking and how it fed the system. But those numbers weren't working anymore. There was a lot more investments happening. And I kind of felt, wow, I'm getting less and less time to really do the artist development that I grew up doing. Do you know what I mean? So it
Mm-hmm.
became more a business centered around streaming and hits more and more. And the artist development was left to artist managers, right? And artists to kind of figure it out. So I think sometimes record labels tend to be, here's the laundry list of what we expect artists to be. And I feel like, or what artists should be doing. But I think what is becoming more and more challenging is kind of like, we're missing some great things. Like record labels are missing great things, because the metrics aren't being met, because TikTok virality isn't happening, or, like, so the metrics are a little off, I think, in terms of signing artists that could truly be career artists, right? So I think I sensed the divide starting to happen because I was sensing how it was impacting my day to day. So I felt like, okay, in order for us to do real artist development, we need to change the model. In order for me, so I need to be kind of a hired gun. Someone needs to hire me. And if they can get the funding and the right partnerships, then I can bring, right, the focus required to develop an artist. So that's how I thought of the agency mindset for my next move. It's because I just really wanted to continue doing artist development
I
selfishly.
really respect that a lot because that's one of the greatest joys is to doing that development work with an artist and to help develop their branding and how they're going to promote and market themselves and so forth. I mean, I get so much joy out of that aspect. But as you mentioned, especially as a label, there's a lot of risk that's involved. I mean, I was running 80/20 Records, which is a small independent record label.
I
So
know.
our resources were very finite and our investment was very finite. So I can only imagine when you scale that up, the amount of risk that's involved. And that's something that you have to put in your mindset, especially on both sides, both the artist and the label, is the risk that's involved for both parties to be in a relationship like that together. And you're right, is the metrics tells you part of the story, but doesn't tell you the entire story. And I know, at least for myself, over the years, I would usually will take that into some consideration just because it does help realize at least some of the seriousness of the artist, because if they are understanding the business aspect of things and they're putting the work into it, they should at least have some sort of metrics, right? And everyone's going to have a varying range as far as what those metrics are,
That's
but
the
at least have
key.
something in place,
Yeah.
right? The ones that have absolutely nothing, I can toss a coin and probably have better luck in trying to guess if it's going to work or not. And obviously there are exceptions to the rule, but it does help immensely to have some sort of metrics, but it is also just a small part of the story. There's also the talent that's behind it, the motivation behind the project. Again, how professional they are. Is there chemistry between yourself and the artist, right? So a number of times, one of the things I've done is I would put together events that were essentially cover shows. We call them guilty pleasure shows. We do guilty pleasure songs. And one of the reasons why we did it for many years was it was a way for me to test and to basically see if I worked with artists well. Like which artists respond back. Go back to what you were talking about work ethic. Which artists were responding back to me in a timely manner? Which artists came prepared to the show? Did they take the set list seriously and they actually practice at it and did a good job with those cover songs? Even though it was something fun and silly, I wanted to see if they really executed that well, right? Yeah. How did the audience react to them, right? So I did that on a number of occasions as a way for me to kind of test out that relationship a little bit. And I continue that on even with this podcast. A number of times, especially in the earlier couple, when the podcast still was just formed, was to see how well artists did on the interviews. Did they come prepared? Were they easy to talk to? Did they show up on time? We pay attention to those things.
It's critical. I love that. I love that way of testing it. I mean, you want to work with artists who are going to work as hard as you, if not more. Do you know what I mean? Like, and if you're carrying them, and we've all been in that scenario, you're not going to get very far, especially in the modern music business.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of modern music business, you have been through, I would say at least, I'm being conservative here, but like 3 to 4 fundamental shifts in the music industry.
You're around long enough, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was just trying to think about it because you mentioned yourself, you just got in when it transitioned from vinyl to CD.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then CD to digital, to specifically digital downloads. I'm not even talking about streaming yet. So specifically to digital downloads, the whole piracy era.
Yeah.
And then to streaming, and then essentially the resurgence of vinyl. And now we're coming into a whole new era now, which is going to be really interesting. So I think we're even getting to the point where we're starting to see the end of the streaming era into something we haven't even seen yet. So I'm kind of curious what your perspective is on where we're at today, and especially in comparison to the music industry when you first started.
It's weird because we've always been the industry that has been defined by the formats, right, that we use. So I think it's so incredible. And again, it's like back to my days of communication studies. Like what's happening is just like the medium is the message. Like our department was named after this amazing communication theorist, Marshall McLuhan. And he used to say there are hot mediums and cool mediums. And the way he processed the message, see, the message is always the message, right? Whether it's something that you scream into a phone or, I don't know, like AI, whatever, the message is always the message. So what an artist has to say, no matter what format it appears in, is the thing that we're marketing at the end of the day. Right. And then we have to figure out how to make money off of it. Right. So I feel that the more things change, the more things really stay the same. You still have to develop talent. Artists matter. And it's always been that record labels have always been sort of the king of the songs, right? Since its inception. They know how to take a song and make it big. But then there's all this other work that needs to happen in order for there to be a real business. Right. And I feel kind of like we're in that zone. We're in the zone of like, I'm in the zone of taking everything I've learned and trying to apply it for artists to create a business for themselves. So no matter what happens to the delivery of music, I still feel that artists should be touring and connecting with their audience. I feel they should be thinking about experiences that are tactile. They should be going to where the audience is. This is why we should never be afraid of TikTok or anything that comes our way, because that's just a group of people. What you decide to do to connect with them is going to be what you add to the story, right? Like, so I'm really fascinated about that aspect of it. Like, tell your story, make sure you're pointing it at the right audience, or make sure you're aware of the audience, and then try to connect the dots as much as possible. And there was an artist I worked with at Warner Brothers. His name is Wayne Coyne. He's in a band called the Flaming Lips. And we did a panel once, and he said the most interesting thing that I say to every artist. He would say the job of the artist is to be interesting. That's your job. Be interesting. If you can't be interesting, don't be an artist. And I'm like coming from a guy who's so musical, for him to sort of boil it down and also to address where we are right now. It's like, why am I listening to you over someone else? Like, what do you have to share with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's that I need to listen to. That he's speaking about those things and boiling it down so simply, right? And I think that those things don't change. So that's why he's always been like this great, amazing spirit when it comes to new technologies. Because to him, like the thing about being an artist is just having a great message and trying to share it with the world.
I love that you shared that story. I totally agree. What I like to sometimes say is an artist's job, a professional artist, your job is to get attention.
Yeah.
And same thing, it's like you have to be interesting.
Yeah.
And however that is, whatever that it takes to do that, where it's still something that you are proud of. I'll put that in there too, that you are proud of doing. But whatever it takes to do that, that's what you're going to need to do in order to make money from it. Right. Essentially, at the end of the day, right, is you have to be interesting in some form or fashion. And, Flaming Lips are great. I have a friend who is a huge fan of theirs. And I've seen them perform. Not actually last year, I saw them perform. And they not only did they put on an incredible music performance, but they have gigantic inflatable pink robots, behind them, too. And again, you mentioned it best yourself. It is the experience. Right. And people, I think now more than ever, want to have those in-person tactile experiences. And we've seen this proven time and time again. So yes, digital is also important. You got to find where the audience is. And that too, I think, has always been the case, right? I mean, artists had to get interviewed on the radio or go on the Tonight Show, Jay Leno, or, whoever the talk show host is, right? And anywhere where the attention is, whatever that medium is, that's where the artists have to be.
Yeah, and I have two amazing, brilliant things that Wayne did, which is so interesting. So one of them is when I started at Warner Brothers, he walked into my office. He goes, "Okay, I want these two walls." And I'm like, and I had no idea what he was talking about. And what he was talking about was he made these two pieces behind me.
Oh,
This
wow.
is like the Flaming Lips in Glastonbury. And he framed it and he put it on my wall and he did two giant pieces. And I thought that that was so interesting that he would take advantage of the moment and make sure that I was present with his work all the time. You know what I mean? That he was connecting with me. So that was amazing. And then the bubble, like the famous, like him in the bubble. And then during COVID, I don't know if you remember, but he made it on the cover of Rolling Stone in the because we're all in our
In
own
the
little bubbles,
in the
right?
bubble. Yep.
So I was
Mm-hmm.
struck with how long some of these moments just stayed for. Do you know what I mean? That was like
Mm-hmm.
a huge moment for him to get on the cover of Rolling Stone, but that's how he got it, right? By just being Wayne, you know? And like, I feel that that's so incredible. And to discover that in every artist that I work with, or really trying to find it, is so critical, you know? Yeah.
Absolutely. I it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I do feel that, when you are an artist, it is an extension of your own persona, right? It does, in a lot of cases go beyond the music, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is extremely important to understand that, as that, and also, I think you said it best yourself too, live in the moment, right? It was Wayne being Wayne, but also the fact that it was the current environment that we were all in at a time that was unfamiliar to us.
Yeah.
And he did something that was unique and interesting and fun and quirky, right? Which is Wayne. So it was an extension of himself, extension of his persona, but also being relevant to the moment.
Exactly. And that to me never changes. Like the discovering that never changes. Art and how it's made never changes. The formats can change, but I know that Wayne's going to figure out a way. Like if that streaming disappears, he's going to figure out a way for people to talk to him, you know, or to think about him, you know? Great
Mm-hmm.
artists always do.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, we can certainly wrap things up here. I did want to ask you a couple of fun questions.
Yeah.
First question I wanted to ask you was, what was the very first concert that you ever went to?
AC/DC.
Ooh, that's a good one. I
For
like
those
that.
about to rock, I was
That's
11.
very, very cool. Wow, 11 and could see AC/DC.
I had to snuck.
Okay.
I snuck out of the house for that one.
Oh, to say, did your parents take you or snuck out? So you.
It was awesome.
Okay, that I love. Do you have a go-to artist right now that you've been really liking to listen to?
That is very interesting. I mean, I feel like I'm very committed to the artists I'm working with, and there's one artist in particular that I mean, I listen to so much music. Honestly, it's so hard to choose. But Maris, because I want to plug Maris, I'm going to say Maris. She's incredible. Like, I've been developing and working with her for 3 years, and she's been just exactly the kind of artist that Wayne Coyne talks about. Do you know what I mean? Is
Mhm.
everything's her playground, and the music's incredible. So definitely check that out.
Last question for you is, if you were only able to give one piece of advice, what would that one piece of advice be?
I think love the moment you're in with your work. Like, definitely, this is more than one piece of advice. Work hard because people notice the work, but really, more important than the work is like enjoy yourself at work. I can't tell you how many people are in the music business who don't like it anymore. And that I think is tragic.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Mm,
I think that was a big theme in everything that we were talking about, is just being in the moment and enjoying the work. And
yeah,
I think that goes hand in hand, right? Is that you will work harder if you're enjoying the work.
yeah,
It doesn't feel like work anymore at that point. You're just doing something that makes you feel fulfilled or gives you some sort of joy. And I feel that if you want to be there, that's going to resonate with everybody else too.
yeah. Couldn't agree more with that.
So,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much again for being on the show. I learned so much from you, and it's always so inspiring to hear everyone's stories. But I really appreciate you being on the show and sharing your inspiration. And we'll definitely make sure we have links to Black Box and anything else that you would like in our show notes. But thank you so much again
Oh
for
my
being
God.
on the
Thank
show.
you.
I
This
really do
hour
appreciate it.
flew by.
I know, right? It was so quick.
So thank you.